capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi apartment buildings or multifamilies that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's a
Zach.
tough one. I
It's
know,
really hard.
and maybe
Yes.
comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. So tonight we're going to be continuing on with A People's History of the United States. We're starting Chapter 4. I skipped ahead last week to Chapter 5 by mistake, so we're backing it up, and we're going to start back with Chapter 4. So this is kind of the time that's leading up to the U.S. Revolutionary War, and we're going to see how the owner class tricks the working class into fighting their war for them, to overthrow the monarchy and give all the power to them instead. And joining me tonight is Trisha. How you doing tonight, Trisha? Not too bad. A little bit of a hot day. I was working out in the sun, doing weeding and stuff like that. So glad to be out of the heat finally. I'm sure.
Sweet relief.
Yeah, right. I'm sure you're still going through all of that heat down where you're at, huh?
Yeah, it's not too bad though. We haven't been hitting triple digits this week because the rain's finally started. So it's been more in the 80s and 90s. A lot more comfortable.
Oh, yeah, that's not so bad. Not so bad at
Yeah.
all. Yeah, this last weekend was just gorgeous here. Amanda and I got to go to a state park, and it was just like there was a nice breeze. It was like in the upper 60s. It was like perfect hiking weather. So it's nice to actually see like what what summer's supposed to be like, or early summer's supposed to be like in Minnesota, instead of all these like record-setting temperatures and stuff like that. Finally have a break for
Right.
once.
You can actually, when you go outside, the humidity isn't fucking killing you.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. Um, so I know you did a Zoom call over the weekend, right? With For We Are Many and the Panther movement. Is that correct?
Yes. Every weekend we do classes. It's the Hassan Shakur political education course. Provided by the United Panther Movement, the New African Black Panther Party, and the White Panther Party. And we did have a little bit of audio difficulty because of that disconnect between Zoom and Restream. But Rob told me he's going to show me some tricks to fix that. So hopefully next week we won't have those audio issues. But the
Yeah.
class itself was on point. We actually took the first time to discuss the Supreme overruling or overturning Roe v. Wade, and had a very healthy discussion about that one before diving into this week's course material. So yeah, if anybody wants to check that out, that's on For We Are Many as well as on Left Signal Boost TV.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it is tough to do a stream from Zoom to restream. I think you have to have like the highest level one to just do it connect it up directly. So I've
Yeah,
never tried to do that. All I've ever been able to do is just do the full screen share your audio thing, but then that means you're in the Zoom call. You're not interacting with the chat or anything. So then you got to do like you have to have a second device just to keep up with the chat log and keep your interactions up.
yeah. And, I mean,
So
it
it's hard.
that that is a path I could try and just hop in the comments from my phone to interact with our viewers and stuff. It's just been kind of hit and miss with my Wi-Fi signal where I'm at right now too, where it,
Yeah.
it struggles. I didn't want to do that and end up accidentally cutting the feed to the laptop altogether. But we will figure it out.
Yeah,
We're
I hear you.
figure out some ways
Yeah,
around that, because it wouldn't let me do the direct share with Zoom as the source because of
I know. That's
not
so
having that
stupid.
premium package.
Ugh.
I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that the path Rob was talking about with putting the embedded code in for the Zoom meeting before launching is not now behind
Yeah.
a paywall, because it didn't used to be behind a paywall to just directly
Oh,
share it.
so I've
Um,
never tried that one before. Does that work differently than setting up the restream normally?
a little bit. It's something you have to do before you enter the studio itself.
Oh wow.
I don't know how to do it yet until we are able to sit down and do some more tutorial and stuff. So fingers crossed. Hopefully that works. See, we got a
Yeah, I
few
hope
people.
so.
Hi guys.
Yeah, thanks for the follow, Jesse Tiny Valor, and also thanks for the follow, Easy Goodnight. We are talking about People's History of the United States. We're doing Chapter 4 of the audiobook, and this is Part 1. So we're just getting into the early stages of the American Revolution, and we're going to see how they tricked the working class into fighting their war for them, and then gained all the spoils from it for themselves. So it should be a
But of
fun time.
course,
But of
they're
course,
just going to
yeah,
colonize.
that's right. I mean, we've come to expect nothing less from going through this book. So, all right.
Legal unity.
Oops. Gotta reset it to the beginning, and then we will start get the closed captioning going. And here we go.
This recording is a product of Audio Anarchy, A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Chapter 4, Tyranny is Tyranny. Around 1776, certain important people in the English colonies made a discovery that would prove enormously useful for the next 200 years. They found that by creating a nation, a symbol, a legal unity called the United States, they could take over land, profits, and political power from favorites of the British Empire. In the process, they could hold back a number of potential rebellions and create a consensus of popular support for the rule of a new, privileged leadership. When we look at the American Revolution this way, it was a work of genius, and the Founding Fathers deserve the odd tribute they have received over the centuries. They created the most effective system of national control devised in modern times, and showed future generations of leaders the advantages of combining paternalism with command. Starting with Bacon's rebellion in Virginia, by 1760 there had been 18 uprisings aimed at overthrowing colonial governments. There had also been 6 black rebellions from South Carolina to New York, and 40 riots of various origins. By this time also there emerged, according to Jack Green, quote, stable, coherent, effective, and acknowledged local political and social elites. And by the 1760s, this local leadership saw the possibility of directing much of the rebellious energy against England and her local officials. It was not a conscious conspiracy, but an accumulation of tactical responses. After 1763, with England victorious over France in the 7 Years' War, known in America as the French and Indian War, expelling them from North America, ambitious colonial leaders were no longer threatened by the French. They now had only 2 rivals left, the English and the Indians. The British, wooing the Indians, had declared Indian lands beyond the Appalachians out of bounds to whites. the proclamation of 1763. Perhaps once the British were out of the way, the Indians could be dealt with. Again, no conscious forethought strategy by the colonial elite, but a growing awareness as events developed. With the French defeated, the British government could turn its attention to tightening control over the colonies. It needed revenues to pay for the war and looked to the colonies for that. Also, the colonial trade became more and more important to the British economy and more profitable. It had amounted to about £500,000 in 1700, but by 1770 was worth £2,800,000. So, the American leadership was less in need of English rule, the English more in need of the colonists' wealth. The elements were there for conflict.
So how is that conflict going to be played against one another? I have a feeling that we're building towards those American elites using the pressure that all the colonists are feeling to their own ends and not to the ends of the average working class people.
No, of course not, because they're probably more concerned with keeping all of that wealth to themselves than anything.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to share it with anybody, not the people producing it or the people
No,
trying to
certainly
tax
not.
it back in England.
Right. Yeah. So interesting though, as we see with the analysis of the likes of Marx, the historical material analysis of what leads to revolution. And you have the English, who have been heavily depleted by their war with the French, looking then to the more vulnerable colonies to recoup their losses. And so they turn the screws on them. And that pressure then eventually is going to turn around and blow back in the face of the English and start the Revolutionary War. So we see material conditions coming into play very much so in leading up to the Revolutionary War. All right, continuing on.
The war brought glory for the generals, death to the privates, wealth for the merchants, unemployment for the poor. There were 25,000 people living in New York. There had been 7,000 in 1720. When the French and Indian War ended, a newspaper editor wrote about the growing, quote, number of beggars and wandering poor, unquote, in the streets of the city. Letters in the papers questioned the distribution of wealth. Quote, how often have our streets been covered with thousands of barrels of flour for trade, while our near neighbors can hardly procure enough to make a dumpling to satisfy hunger? Gary Nash's study of city tax lists shows that by the early 1770s, the top 5% of Boston's taxpayers controlled 49% of the city's taxable assets. In Philadelphia...
It sounds like a proto-Bernie Sanders there, you know. The top 5% controls 49% of the wealth in Boston. It's not right. Sticking it to the working class.
Right?
But it just shows how these patterns happen again and again. Somehow, a system that's set up where you can just legally take whatever you want from people that work for you because they've signed some sort of contract, you know, more or less under derision, or not derision, under duress. That's the word I'm looking for. So against their will, you know, facing starvation if they don't take some job somewhere.
Right.
So because of the laws, you can take whatever you want. And somehow that just keeps amassing wealth at the very top until you have a very tiny elite that controls most of everything. So the original American dream, where no matter where you come from, you can make it and rise as high as the meritocracy will take you, kind of falls apart under that sort of a system because people are not gaining wealth through any sort of merit necessarily. They just happen to be in the right place at the right time to own a thing, whether that's a factory, a warehouse, ships, whatever it may be. That doesn't take extraordinary skill. That doesn't take the great men of history to just own stuff. All it takes is good fortune, and then somehow, uh, you
An
know,
exploitation of labor.
yeah. But somehow we've turned it around to make it into a fairy tale where, as long as you are keeping your head down and nose to the grindstone, eventually you too could be a millionaire. There's that whole phenomenon of the American being the temporary embarrassed millionaire. It's just like, my ship hasn't come in yet, but when it does, I'll rise to the ranks through the ranks like everyone else.
Right.
The ranks are already, controlled though by people that own stuff, and really that's the only way to become wealthy. You have to own something, whether you're a landlord, whether you're um, a business owner. You have to own. There's no street vendor that's sold enough, hot dogs out on the street to ever become wealthy. Maybe comfortable, but never wealthy.
Right. If hard work made you wealthy, I know a lot of people in service industry that should be fucking millionaires right now. So they
Absolutely.
work a lot harder than these other fuckers who are calling themselves, you know?
Oh,
It's one of those things
oh,
where, I
absolutely.
mean, unless you basically luck out and win the birth lottery of having something handed to you to be able to go buy things and own them, you're not going to hit that level of wealth,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Like people try to
It's
say, oh, Jeff Bezos is, self-made, and Elon Musk man-made or self-made, and it's like, did you forget that they, had opportunities given to them
mm-hmm.
because of like in Elon Musk's case,
Well,
his
Elon Musk case
own
especially. Yeah.
fucking mines, emerald mines in South
Yeah.
Africa, where they were getting the fuck out of slavery. That's why he had money to. Jeff Bezos got money to start Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
This There's no such thing as
Yeah.
self-made millionaire, let alone billionaire.
No. No. That's never the case. Um, and you can go back throughout history. I think it was J.D. Rockefeller who was perhaps by the standard of the day, the wealthiest man who's ever lived in the United States. Now, maybe Musk has surpassed him by now, but still, an incredibly wealthy guy, especially for his time. And if you go back far enough, you find that he got his start because one of his relatives, I believe his father, put up half the money to start his first business. And from there, he just started exploiting people the legal way, just by having employees and taking some of the product of their labor. And that's how he amassed his fortune. He wasn't some genius that went from rags to riches, and it's never actually the case. If you look into the backstories, even a little bit of any of these people, and this is all well documented public record sort of stuff. These are not fringe conspiracy sites. These are like Wikipedia and stuff, just saying the biography of people like Rockefeller and Musk and whatever. And like Musk too has to be about the most overblown figure in America right now,
Right.
as though he's like the modern day Tony Stark, when he has his name on two patents. Both of them have to do with like a door on the Tesla and I think the charger connector. Like not even the entire station, but just like the way that the charger connects to the connector. And that's it. And he's only one of like about half a dozen people on each of those patents. Other than that, he's not invented a damn thing. He's had some dumb ideas, and some of
Yeah.
them places like Las Vegas will entertain, but none of them have come to fruition.
The thing is, even with things that have his name on the patent, is he actually any part of the genius behind that, or did he just hire
Good
the
question.
right geniuses?
Right. Do you just be like, hey, I own the company, so I'm going to put my name on this? You're okay with that, right, guys? Right, guys? Right, guys? And then they're like, yeah. What are we going to do? At least we get our names on it too. Um, and yeah, it's none of those things were revolutionary breakthroughs. A door, a charging thing. Both of those things already existed in cars. He didn't do anything great. He didn't even do anything as big as Henry Ford, like,
Right.
come up with an entirely new way of assembling cars. Like, at least that is something. But yeah, Musk is just a complete fraud. And
Much.
like, as much of a fraud as he is, his followers are that much insufferable. Like, I cannot stand interacting with any of them because they just swallow wholesale everything that comes out of his mouth, every piece of mythology that's been built up around him. They're just insufferable.
Agreed. It's one of the most fucking frustrating things ever to try to talk to any of them
Oh yeah.
because they don't want to hear that literally everything that he has stems back to slave money
Uh-huh.
from daddy's emerald mines. And he was
Yeah.
born with just one but two silver spoons in his mouth because his mom was also a top model from the time she was like 15, 16, something like that. She was still a kid when she started making hella bank. So, like, we're talking about privilege upon privilege upon privilege. And, if you have money, I'm not saying don't help your kids, but I am saying if you're going to build a business, do it the right way. Don't exploit the fuck out of the labor because if he or Jeff Bezos had built either of those companies in a manner that actually served the people making those companies possible, neither one of them would be billionaires. They would still be very well off. But guess what? Their employees, if they were also part owner and had a stake in the company, they would also be very well off. And instead, we have
Oh
two
yeah.
individuals who hoarded all kinds of fucking. While the people who make the businesses possible are fighting to even have a basic fucking pay that covers the cost of living, let alone any kind of benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Part that
Yeah.
suck.
I mean, the vast majority of Amazon's workers are just living paycheck to paycheck, just scraping by. I mean, you got to wonder what sort of innovations might come out if they were actually able to support themselves and where they didn't have to worry about that. They could start thinking about other things if they had the opportunity to do so. Start thinking about ways to make the company better. And if it were run as a worker cooperative, they would also have a vested interest in making the company better because it would mean more return to them as well. I mean, they would be both owner and shareholder of that company, you know, as we think of
Right?
it with traditionally traded companies.
Like
Um,
when you actually have a stake in it, guess
mhm.
what happens? You care more.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just a job that they could be like, "Fuck this! I don't care. I could go work in any other fucking factory or supply chain, etc." Why should they give a fuck if it's not even giving them enough pay to survive, let alone anything else? No. Guess what?
Hmm.
When people start to actually have a stake and start to really genuinely give a fuck because they feel like they are part of it and not just feeling it, but actually are and
Hmm.
have over companies run, you see things fucking. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's companies. I can't remember the name of it now. There was one that the CEO got a lot of shit a few years ago for lowering his own pay down to 70,000 a year in
Oh yeah.
order to be able to raise everybody's pay who works there to 70K a year as
Hmm.
well. And he doesn't fucking regret it at all. He's like, yeah, so I had to sell my second home. I don't give a shit. Guess what? Now the people who work here, who are now also having a stake in this company, they can afford to buy homes now. They're not living in poverty
Hmm.
now. They have houses, they have cars, and he would rather see everybody up than to be able to sit there and go, well, yeah, well, I'm a millionaire and I've got multiple vacation homes and shit, but everybody else is suffering so that I can have these things. Fuck that.
Hmm.
Why do we even allow that kind of toxicity when it comes to the frame of mind of, entrepreneurship? Like, I don't get that. I'm
Yeah. Right.
telling all of you, start becoming venture communists.
Yeah.
Right out.
Nice to see you, Caitlin. You hit the nail on the head there. History of the United States. It's trash. Then it got worse, and now it's kind of. We could even add to that. It's become a dumpster fire at this point. So it's trash that's actively burning. So yeah,
Yep,
good good point.
absolutely.
Uh,
I'm telling you, Caitlin is never wrong.
no, no, she knows what's what.
Like what falls out of her face sometimes. They get
Yeah.
soft and weak and get offended. But I'm telling you, Kate,
Mhm.
you're always fucking on point.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, and Jesse brings up a good point too. Is if you give the workers more power, they realize they deserve more, and they realize they can get more as well. That's why these movements, such as the Starbucks unionization that's been going across the country, tends to go in that way, because everyone believes it's not possible until someone shows that it is, and then just one by one they start falling like dominoes, and then people are like, oh, wait a minute, this is becoming a movement. This is probably something we can do here too. Hey, Cripple Punk, good to have you here. Hey, Eric. I'm sorry, I'm wanting to call you Eric Prawn, but it is Epic Prawn. Good to have you back here. Um, Welcome in, and welcome to Alyosha as well. Good to have you. Um, so yeah. All right, I think I'm going to move ahead in the text just a little bit here.
Philadelphia and New York, too, wealth was more and more concentrated. Court-recorded wills showed that by 1750, the wealthiest people in the cities were leaving 20,000 pounds, equivalent to about $5 million today. In Boston, the lower classes began to use the town meeting to vent their grievances. The governor of Massachusetts had written that in those town meetings, quote, the meanest inhabitants, by the constant attendance there, generally are the majority, and outvote the gentlemen, merchants, substantial traders, and all the better part of the inhabitants. What seems to have happened in Boston is that certain lawyers, editors, and merchants of the upper classes, but excluded from the ruling circles close to England, men like James Otis and Samuel Adams, organized a Boston caucus, and through their oratory and their writing, quote, molded laboring class opinion, called the mob into action, and shaped its behavior, unquote. This is Gary Nash's description of Otis, who, he says, quote, keenly aware of the declining fortunes and the resentment of ordinary townspeople, was mirroring as well as molding popular opinion. We have here a forecast of the long history of American politics, the mobilization of lower class energy by upper class politicians for their own purposes. This was not purely deception. It involved, in part, a genuine recognition of lower class grievances, which helps to account for its effectiveness as a tactic over the centuries. As Nash puts it, quote, James Otis, Samuel Adams, Royal Tyler, Oxenbridge Thatcher, and a host of other Bostonians linked to the...
How are these real names? Oxenbrook Thatcher? What the hell?
Same thing. Like, who the fuck would name their kid that and why?
I'm going to back up 1 second to hear that again.
Tactic over the centuries. As Nash puts it, quote, James Otis, Samuel Adams, Royal Tyler, Oxenbridge Thatcher, and a...
Royal Tyler and Oxenbridge Thatcher.
Oxenbridge. Yes, Jesse,
Oh.
British. Painfully. Like, that hurt to fucking hear. Oh my god.
Yeah, Oxenbridge Thatcher. My God, like you're not trying to blend in at all as a wealthy elite at that point. You naming your kid that. Wow.
Some fucking hoity-toity names if I ever heard them. What the fuck? Oh my god.
I mean, I suppose you go by Ox. Maybe for your college days, you know, be Ox. But then of course, when you get into law school or whatever, go back to Oxenbridge Thatcher. That's funny.
A host of other Bostonians linked to the artisans and laborers through a network of neighborhood taverns, fire companies, and the caucus, espoused a vision of politics that gave credence to laboring class views and regarded as entirely legitimate the participation of artisans and even laborers in the political process.
Even laborers? What?
Ooh.
What kind of radical
Bunch of
nonsense
girls.
are they spouting there? Artisans, yeah, sure. Artisans, I can see. Artisans actually have a useful skill, but laborers, all they do is produce all the wealth of the world, physically.
Right. Right. That's not valuable. Come on now.
Yeah. No.
Fuck.
I know. The way these people look at the lower classes, my God.
In
Yeah.
1762, Otis, speaking against the conservative rulers of the Massachusetts colony, represented by Thomas Hutchinson, gave an example of the kind of rhetoric that a lawyer.
Wait a minute. Caitlin, you say this plays into 3% origin story? Is this the 3% of people that were bold enough or whatever, however they frame it, to join the American Revolution? Is that how they got their name, if I remember? I think that's
It,
right. Something stupid and larpy just like that.
pretty much, yeah. And they think that they can, I don't know, do the same and, I don't know, re-revolutionize with 3% of the populace to turn this into an ethno-state. It's what they want. They're white supremacists. Let's see. She said, they claim here in New England that the working class was enslaved and it was actually only a handful of soldiers who went thug and went around leading the rally.
Yeah, I mean, I would believe it's the 3% because they just talked about the 3% that was the owning class that was trying to spur on this revolution. So yeah, it's 3%, sure, but it's not just average Joes of the day. It's the wealthy elite. That's the
Right.
3%. So that's who they're LARPing as, even though they're trying to come off as more working class and just of the common folk.
Right.
So
I'm just going to frame this very quickly that when it comes to these white nationalists that she's referring to,
mhm.
sorry, but if you can afford to buy an entire fucking arsenal, you're clearly more than the average level of wealthy.
Yeah,
S-
yeah.
Stop pretending that you are labor and the working class. Like, you're probably more likely part of the exploiter class, even if it's just higher up in management or something. You have to make a lot of money to be able to afford to buy countless guns that are thousands of dollars a piece and
Mhm.
fuckloads of ammo with them. And
Mhm.
here's where Pete's at, fuckloads of explosives to go with too.
Yeah, and
Um,
then on top of
there's
that,
like,
your custom Kevlar vest and all of your bells and whistles and your Batman utility belt that you bring around to every place that you go rally at, and then
yeah, you
not to
don't know
mention
where they are.
your main vehicle and your bug out vehicle and like all this stuff. Like, yeah, it's just it's a consumer lifestyle when it comes down to it,
Yeah, pretty
with a
much.
little bit of larpiness attached at the end.
Yeah. Oh, it's fucking crazy. Yeah, she said the tavern bar owner part is still true. In modern day, they have gyms and bars and farms and gun shops.
Oh yeah.
Never changed.
That's how they keep that
That
white supremacist network going. Yeah.
it's kind of fucking scary. Some of the things that's going on out there. Like, they even have entire farms where they just keep all the women and children at. It, yeah,
Ew.
yeah. It's fucked up. It's fucked up.
Gross.
Yeah.
Ah, man. Yeah, gross, but not surprising that these things get into cult status, like literal cult status. Not just, I'm not just being euphemistic here, but like with charismatic leaders that have special rules for themselves and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
It's funny how often that tends to be the case.
It's fucking gross.
Sure is. Well, continuing on.
Could use in mobilizing city mechanics and artisans. Quote, I am forced to get my living by the labor of my hand and the sweat of my brow, as most of you are, and obliged to go throw good report and evil report for bitter bread, earned under the frowns of some who have no natural or divine right to be above me, and entirely owe their grand.
Oh, no natural or divine right. Like, aren't those really the same thing when it comes down to it? Like, all the people that believe in that sort of bullshit of like of natural law and stuff like that, it's always based in religion when you get down far enough.
It's Christopher's fucking ideology around manifest destiny.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they literally
precisely that.
try
Yeah.
to date them to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So divine right, natural law sounds about the same. And it's all
Delusional.
just bullshit. It was delusional, yes. Yeah.
Delusions of grandeur. This is literally a mental illness diagnosed in the DSM.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Believing you have some divine right to something. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, but fully codified into law in many places in this day, in that day and age, I should say. That's where the monarchs came from, and how they continued their rules. Being like, God told me it was okay.
Right.
So
I'm the one God chose. You have to do what I say.
yeah,
Because
right.
everybody in my fucking bloodline decided to inbreed, and it made me. God
Oh,
chose me.
yes.
Check out my super long fucking jaw. It doesn't
Here's
refuse
my
to.
barracuda jaw. Yeah, that's right.
Or not to be
Oh,
body shaming. I'm incest shaming.
yeah. Well, of course, those people had no choice in the matter, but yeah, yeah. It just reminds me of the guy Alexander. Have you heard that name before?
What, Alexander?
Ali Alexander. It's he was a right wing organizer. He was pretty instrumental in the January 6th coup. Anyway, he has a very prominent Habsburg jaw. Like you can see it like from a mile away. So
Yeah.
probably no coincidence with that.
No. That's one thing, too, that I really, really genuinely wish that genetics was a required science course in high school so that people would understand that whether you're inbreeding directly with family members or inbreeding by only wanting to breed with those who look like you and are genetically similar to you, you're fucking up your progeny, okay? The healthiest progeny comes from breeding with people who are as genetically different from you as possible. So the shit of like these white nationalists out here right now, like we need to protect the white birth rate and all this stupid shit, they don't even grasp that, like, no, you're literally asking for genetic deficiency.
Mm, right. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense at all. I'm gonna bring him up real quick on screen here
Okay.
because I found a picture of him so everyone can see exactly what I mean when I say Habsburg jaw. So this is him. You can see he can't even close his mouth correctly because he's got that jaw just sticking way out.
Damn. Yeah, like,
And yeah, he was one of the biggest organizers of January 6th. He wants, I think he wants a theocracy. I'm pretty sure.
it's so gross. History has already shown us how fucked things get when you live in a theocracy. Like,
Yeah, you would think so.
oh, goodness.
Let's see what this is.
Oh boy, you found a Twitter feed. Those are always interesting.
Kill lists a provisional government, a tent city holding millions and millions and millions and millions, sanctioned looting and riots, a refusal to evacuate without presidential proclamation, impromptu kangaroo court trials, a theocratic government committee. You'll be stunned. And when you realize that Donald Trump's handpicked Ali Alexander, a convicted felon known as a Christofascist, uh, to not only lead the march on the Capitol, but do so in simultaneous constant contact with Trump, the Trump campaign, that is, and far right extremists, paramilitary soldiers, it's ball game. So yeah, so he was coordinating with the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, GOP legislators, uh, did in 21 days of planning. It was terrifyingly extraordinary. So there you have him. That's Ali Alexander.
Oh god, from that angle you can really see the Habsburg jaw.
You really can, yeah. It is
God
not
damn,
subtle.
guy.
It is not subtle at all. Oh, there we go. There's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
breeding.
and in some people it gets so extreme that like I think you mentioned it earlier, but they can't even feed themselves because their teeth just do not mesh together at all.
right? I mean,
Pretty
hell,
crazy.
back in the day, that used to be a cause of death in infancy because that super long jaw not lining up like that meant that babies couldn't even latch on to breastfeed.
Good point. Good point. But yeah, there he is with Alex Jones and what the hell is that other guy's name?
Oh God, I forget. Kate might know though. Kate, you still with us? What's this douchebag's name?
It's
He
on the tip
looks.
of my tongue. He he did what was he? The Groypers. He's the head of the Groypers. Nick Fuentes. That's the name. God, what a disgusting person. So there you have it, though. All right, back to the book, though. Let's get enough looking at incest and fascism. Let's look at the history of our incestuous fascist origin.
Indeed. I'll be right back. I gotta grab another drink. I got the hiccups.
Sure thing.
Woo, and I bumped my head.
Yeah, America First. That's the one I was thinking of. Thank you, Ali. Uh, Nick Fuentes. God, I hate that guy. The Not So Proud Boys, Unoath Breakers, and others. January 6th. Yep, that's right, Ali. D'Souza with his 2000 Mules movie? Oh, I don't know that one. I don't like Dinesh D'Souza either, so I can't imagine it's anything warm and cuddly. But yeah, I had some people to shout out earlier. But I will get to that right now. So everyone should follow Ali Osher. Really great Twitch political commenter. Covers a lot of the national politics. Let's give him a follow. Epic Prawn was in here earlier. Another great Twitch streamer to follow. You're welcome, Ali. Anytime. How did that not work with the... Oh, you're still here, Epic Brown. Okay. There we go. All right, well, we're going to wait to go back into it until Trisha gets back. I think I need to turn down her mic a little bit because I'm getting some feedback. I don't want to turn it down too low, though. Maybe I should turn myself down as well. How are the levels for everybody? Is the audiobook, myself, and Trisha pretty much at the same level for you? Or is it a little bit out of whack? Yeah, I'm definitely getting feedback. 2000 Mules. So what is 2000 Mules about? Because I don't think I've heard of that movie in particular, Ali. If you don't mind, like one sentence synopsis of it. Tucker and Hannity won't play it. Even Tucker and Hannity won't play it. Well, that's a pretty good indication. Ah, okay. Beer Bash Jawson. I do have him in my list of people that I follow, or them. I don't actually know if it's what their gender is, but yeah, definitely. Levels are decent on your end. Thank you so much. All right, let's get back into the text.
Grandeur and honor to grinding the faces of the poor. Boston seems to have been full of class anger in those days. In 1763, in the Boston Gazette, someone wrote that, quote, a few persons in power were promoting political projects, quote, for keeping the people poor in order to make them humble, unquote. This accumulated sense of grievance against the rich in Boston may account for the explosiveness of mob action after the Stamp Act of 1765. Through this act, The British were taxing the colonial population to pay for the French war, in which the colonists had suffered to expand the British Empire. That summer, a shoemaker named Ebenezer Mackintosh led a mob in destroying the house of a rich Boston merchant named Andrew Oliver. 2 weeks later, the crowd turned to the home of Thomas Hutchinson, symbol of the rich elite who ruled the colonies in the name of England. They smashed up his house with axes, drank the wine in his wine cellar, and looted the house of its furniture and other objects.
Hell yeah. That's right. He's gonna keep it. He's gonna hoard all that wealth for himself. Then yeah, I can't say I'm too sad for him.
Right. Me neither.
So Alyosher says that 2,000 Mules was about ballot boxes during COVID. 23,500 of them, illegal ballot boxes, or illegal ballots in boxes during COVID. That's so interesting that they still hang on to that sort of conspiracy, because it was actually the California Republicans that got caught putting out fake ballot boxes so that people would literally put their box into a box that, or their ballot, into a box that never went anywhere. And they got caught doing it, and I don't think suffered much, if any, consequences for it. It's always projection with them. So every time they start accusing. Yeah, go ahead, Tricia.
Just to say, Arizona, where Trump and his people were he lost the recount done to his own people.
I know. Oh. And they did it several times too.
It's befuddling that he literally himself and his followers into actually thinking that this election got stolen. And it's like, now believe me, that was a lot of people coming out and voting against Trump. And in my opinion, the two are no fucking different from each other. I didn't vote for either one of them. I voted green, but it was hate voting. There was that many people that just hated fucking Trump, that wanted him the fuck out, that they were like, yep, I hate Biden too, but I'll vote for him just to fucking knock Trump out of, it's, it's just delusional to that it was stolen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Giuliani
I like Alyosher.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of echo from you, Tricia.
Oh. I was just saying I like Alyosher's comment there. GOP, gaslight, obstruct, and project.
That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it was amazing. Trial after trial after trial, they just kept saying, my God, man, why did you even bring this before us? This was the sloppiest case I've ever seen. And he just kept going and losing again and again and again. And somehow it was always because of some grand conspiracy against all of them. And his followers just ate it up. And they believed him. I guess that's all they had to cling to at that point. But wow. Yeah. It was just an astounding thing to see. Just to see how completely incompetent Rudolph Giuliani is and how conspiratorially minded he is, just to completely latch on hook, line, and sinker to any sort of conspiracy that was floating out there, and just promote it like it was the only truth possible.
It's downright surreal. Like, how could you guys possibly believe all this bullshit?
It's a good question. Yeah. I think you're right, Jesse.
There's a lot of studies that have linked low intellect with conservative values, and seeing everything from their racial bigotry to their misogyny, the whole 9 yards. It's literally statistically linked to stupid. So
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, because I don't know. It probably has something to do with your propensity to be just afraid of everyone and everybody who's not like you, because you
Uh-huh.
cannot understand other people, or you have a lot of trouble understanding other people. So there's probably some causation somewhere in there, I would imagine. But then on the other hand, having a higher intellect is linked pretty strongly to having all sorts of other mental health problems, like depression just from knowing more about the way the world works, um, not being able to get rid of that knowledge in any way. Um, yeah,
Yeah. That
feelings
old
of
alienation.
hopelessness by not being able to. Yeah, yeah. There is a nugget of truth in that saying for sure.
It's sad, but we still need to raise awareness because how else are we going to fix this fucking shit show we're stuck living in?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah. I kind of like that,
Like,
Jesse. A higher fear and disgust reposes. I think that's a good way of putting it,
the
even though it's
paradox
not
of
what you meant.
being there with being ignorance is bliss. So fucking true.
Uh
So
huh. Uh huh. Yeah. All right. Well,
but
let's continue on informing ourselves and becoming more depressed about the the origins of our country that are still present. I mean, more so than ever, like much more so than when I started doing this series. We can see on display that, yeah, I mean, it doesn't take that much to just roll everything back to the founding fathers. That's recently did with New York's gun law when I can't remember which justice gave the opinion, but basically it was that if you can't prove that the founding fathers would have wanted it the same way, then you can't have that as a gun law. And it's like the founding fathers had muskets. It took like
right,
30 seconds to load one shot. They didn't have anything
right.
near what we have today. So to ever use them as a basis for legislation about today's technology makes no sense, no matter what side of the issue you're on with gun control. That's just, why are we being beholden to, 200-year dead ghosts? It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Fuck. My brain's just imagining everybody going out and building their own trebuchets, though. Like, okay, let's do this. Let's do
The
this.
founding fathers would have approved. Yeah,
They
yeah.
would. They would totally fucking approve. Guillotines
Uh,
too.
sure, cannon. They had cannons, so sure. How about us?
Where's my fucking cannon? I need a cannon to mount on top of the
There you go. Then you make sure to get the prime spot wherever you go, because they'll know.
Exactly. Right? Just make sure it's set up on some kind of turret where it's got 360 reach.
There,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You don't want to be locked into having to turn the wheel every time you want to re-aim.
Right.
That's no good.
It's a lot of house on wheels to
Yeah, that's right.
try to turn on a dime. But with proper turret.
But then you have to calculate how much weight you can take with you before you have to start paying more in gas for all the extra weight in cannonballs. So you got to balance being armed with those balls versus, you know,
This is true. There
paying too
is a
much money.
max weight capacity for these fuckers.
There you go.
Get
There
rid
you
of a
go.
few bolts. But hey, we can make it happen.
Yeah. Uh, all right, moving on in the text.
Report by colony officials to England said that this was part of a larger scheme in which the houses of 15 rich people were to be destroyed, as part of a, quote, war of plunder, of general leveling and taking away the distinction of rich and poor.
Trebuchet.
It was one of those moments in which fury against the rich went further than leaders like Otis wanted. Could class hatred be focused against the pro-British elite and deflected from the nationalist elite? In New York that same year of the Boston House attacks, someone wrote to the New York Gazette, quote, "Is it equitable that 99, or rather 999, should suffer for the extravagance or grandeur of one, especially when it is considered that men frequently owe their wealth to the impoverishment of their neighbors. The leaders of the revolution would worry about.
You see, that's the thing. They knew it even back then, even before there was a Karl Marx around. Like I
Yep.
don't even know if he would have been born. I probably wouldn't have been born in this era, because I think that would have made him too old by the time he passed. But yeah, they understood that all these rich people got rich only by exploiting their workers. Like,
Yep. That's the thing. Marx didn't create the idea of communism or anything. That actually long before. He
mm-hmm,
merely wrote the critique of capitalism based
right,
on shit show he was already observing happening since capitalism came into power.
absolutely true.
The, a lot of people, especially the working class, were already fucking aware.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. And yet today, I don't think most people have that in their mind that that's where rich people get their money from. They always we have been so propagandized in this country that it's just like the knee jerk reaction to be like, well, they worked really hard for it, and they deserve it because they worked really hard. It seems like the thought just kind of stops at that point for most people, unless they somehow get exposed to any sort of leftist text. But yeah, that's just
Right.
like the default position, and I don't get it.
Right. Like exploiting a bunch of other people's labor is not you working hard for it. That's other people working hard for it and you keeping the majority of the wealth produced.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Wrap
just
your
like when
heads
you
around.
really well, it's just like when you realize that the landlord isn't actually providing you housing because you're giving your money to them and you're making it so they're able to have housing. So you're actually providing housing for them because you're paying their mortgage and you're giving them a living so that they can have a place of their own.
That
And yet the
that
default position is always, well, landlords provide housing. You can't get rid of them. Where would people live? It's like the same
the
goddamn
house is
place.
still
The
there.
landlord just wouldn't get the money.
Right. Right. Landlords provide housing like ticket scalpers provide concerts. Shut the fuck
Right.
up.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely. Yeah.
what?
And that is exactly what it is. It is a manufactured scarcity in this case of something that everyone needs. Because, you could argue that no one needs to have a ticket to a particular concert or whatever. I mean, entertainment is vital to people's, survival. But with housing, somehow that just goes right over people's heads and they just don't see it.
Right. People are bitching about how many unhoused people are in the streets because they don't want to look at poor. It's
Hmm.
like, what are you doing hoarding all these houses? Like this is something
Right.
that Kate and I were discussing last week is, like the Airbnb situation. And granted, there are a lot of people who are doing stuff like renting a room out of their own home to even make it possible for themselves to have said home. But that's a world of people who are exploiting stuff like that because they own 20 fucking houses that they are renting out via Airbnb at rates that locals can't afford for actual
Oh,
housing vacation stays. It's horrendous what's happening with our housing market right
it
now.
absolutely
And
is.
that's
It's
just one
making
thing.
it so much worse.
Companies like Zillow that started as a place to be able to list housing for sale or for rent, that Zillow has made so much money and become so fucking huge that Zillow is buying up the best properties as soon as they get listed so that they can artificially inflate the price of housing, and they're overbidding like far beyond the asking price just to make sure that they get it and not somebody else who just needs a fucking house to live in.
Right. Yeah. 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 I don't think people are being too greedy to expect to have a place to live that has like, modern amenities, no bugs, no rot, no falling apart.
Right.
Um, but but people act like that's somehow something that you have to work your ass off to even be worthy of. Um,
Right.
it makes no sense.
And how are they going to sit there and be like, we can't qualify you for loan because we don't think you can afford a $700 or $800 a month house payment, so instead we're going to force you double that to rent? Fuck you, housing industry.
Right. Right. Yes, my 12-year lease history has no bearing on whether or not I'm a good risk for buying a home and actually being locked into a mortgage. Because a mortgage is a pretty big deal, you know. And it's like, I've been paying a mortgage for the past 12 years. It's just been
Yeah,
someone else's mortgage, not mine.
right.
It's
In
been
an
my landlord's
apartment,
mortgage.
people are paying
Yeah,
someone
that's
else's
what I'm
mortgage
saying.
on the
That's exactly
complex.
what I'm saying.
You know,
Yeah,
um,
because
it's fucking ridiculous.
and it has to be that way in order to have a rental property. Because if your renters were only paying what you were paying for your mortgage, then you wouldn't make any profit, and you couldn't sit back and pretend that you have a job as a
Right.
landlord.
Right.
So by default, you're already paying more than what the mortgage is worth for whatever place you're renting.
It's fucked. It's
It
all
is. It
fucked.
is. It is. It absolutely
My
is.
brain has like a soundtrack for everything, and sometimes it likes to put its own words to things. And right now, it's just like it's all fucked. It's all fucked. All motherfucking fucked. So,
Yep. Yep. All right. Moving on.
Keeping such sentiments within limits. Mechanics were demanding political democracy in the colonial cities, open meetings of representative assemblies, public galleries in the legislative halls, and the publishing of roll call votes, so that constituents could check on representatives. They wanted open air meetings, where the population could participate in making policy, more equitable taxes, price controls, and the election of mechanics and other ordinary people to government posts. Especially in Philadelphia, according to Nash, the consciousness of the lower middle classes grew to the point where it must have caused some hard thinking. Not just among the conservative loyalists sympathetic to England, but even among the leaders of the revolution. Quote, by mid-1776, laborers, artisans, and small tradesmen employing extra-legal measures when electoral politics failed were in clear command in Philadelphia. Unquote. Helped by some middle-class leaders, Thomas Paine, Thomas Young, and others, they, quote, launched a full-scale attack on wealth and even on the right to acquire unlimited private property, unquote. During elections for the 1776 convention to frame a constitution for Pennsylvania, a privates committee urged voters to oppose, quote, great and overgrown rich men. They will be too apt to be framing distinctions in society.
Well, that was prophetic in their
yeah.
analysis, because that's exactly what they did. They put private property up above all the rest of the people. Private property and the people that owned it, that own it, and that's how we have it today.
Yep. I'd also like to point out that how scary transparency has always been to these
Mm-hmm.
motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is not something that we've gained a consciousness about recently through whatever labor movement or whatever. People have always known this sort of thing, and of course they have, because it's the people that are most affected by it that always have a sense that they're somehow being screwed, and when they figure out just how they are being screwed, then they got it. Um, but they still feel powerless because each individual has relatively little power compared to the system as a whole. And that's one reason they love individualism in this country, and promoting the individual and trying to trick people into believing that they rise or fall just on their own individual merit, that it's got nothing to do with where you come from, what advantages you've had or disadvantages. They love
Right.
individualism in this country for that very reason, because it keeps us atomized.
Yep. Like that good old bootstrap theory that has
Oh my
zero
God.
consideration of whether you even boots, let alone laces
Right.
for them.
Well, not to mention that started as a joke. It started as pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like a cartoon character would, where like, for the sake of the joke, the laws of physics don't apply, so you can just grab on your
Right.
boots and lift yourself up into midair. That started as a joke, but it became somehow sage advice to
Right.
yell at people.
How
Uh,
how the fuck people started to actually take that seriously? It's beyond
I
me. Again,
know, right?
another point where they're not learning enough science, or they would understand that the laws of physics don't work that way.
True
Fuck.
enough. All right, here we go. Yeah. Every once in a while, you got to let that steam out. Just give a
Just,
good rebel
just
yell.
which I mean, if I really let it out full volume, I'd probably blow out everybody's speakers here. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
we
contain
would
it.
have to give a warning.
Uh,
Hello to you, Malik Al Kira. Uh, Forgive me if I mispronounced your name. Give me some help if that's it. American Patriots. That's kind of a loaded term, isn't it?
yeah.
What do you mean by American Patriots? Do I believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that should be inalienable? Yes, I do. The thing is, the only way to make that inalienable is to guarantee that no matter what decisions people make in their life, whether it's good decisions, bad luck, good luck, whatever, they still have things like healthcare, food, housing, transportation, education, stuff like that. Because
Yep.
otherwise, you're taking away their right to life if they don't have things like healthcare, or food, or housing. Taking away
Right.
their liberty if they don't have the freedom to move around with transportation, or to pursue whatever career they want through education. And you're taking away their pursuit of happiness if they're forced into a job that they don't want to take because of the threat of impoverishment or starvation. So, so yeah, in that sense, I guess you could call me a patriot. But that's probably not what you're thinking, huh?
We are not nationalists.
No, not by any stretch.
Very clear.
We're not nationalists. We're not the so-called pat socks that have recently arisen, the patriotic socialists like, yeah, Caleb Maupin and Jackson Hinkle and the like, who are basically just Nosbol. But no,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
none of
Those
that
type of
stuff.
fucks, they want a white ethno state, and we're not
Yeah,
about that.
not about that. Not even a little.
Nope. Same,
Yeah,
Jesse.
annoy the hell out of me too. Oh, yeah, yeah, man. I don't think I've sat through an entire debate I've seen that any of them were involved in. I just can't do it. Caleb Maupin doesn't necessarily want a white ethno state, but we're talking more about, well, maybe he does. He really
Cross
likes
balls.
Alexander Dukin,
Right.
so he's pretty
It's
close. He
questionable.
says he says he basically agrees with Alexander Dukin. So, I mean, he hasn't outright said it, but guys like that who literally are. I mean, Alexander Dugin is the guy who coined the term Nazbol, or National Bolshevik. Um, so it's not a good look anyway. If he doesn't believe in that, he needs to. Who's Alexander Dugin? I just said he's the guy who coined the term National Bolshevik or Nazbol. He wants socialism in a Nazi way. That's the easiest
Right.
way to put it.
Limited to white people at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. Trucker rally. Sure, that's a good way to put it too.
At the rally. Yeah.
All right, moving on in the text.
The Privates Committee drew up a Bill of Rights for the convention, including the statement that, quote, an enormous proportion of property vested in a few individuals is dangerous to the rights and destructive of the common happiness of mankind, and therefore every free state hath a right by its laws to discourage the possession of such property. In the countryside where most people lived, there was a similar conflict of poor against rich, one which political leaders would use to mobilize the population against England, granting some benefits for the rebellious poor and many more for themselves in the process. the tenant riots in New Jersey in the 1740s, the New York tenant uprisings of.
Okay, this is gonna be the last question that I humor of you because we're not talking about that right now, Malik. I haven't read any Trotsky, so it'd be hard for me to say whether or not I believe in what he believes. So maybe. How about you, Trisha? I don't know how much you've read of Trotsky
Um,
either.
very little. I've only read bits and pieces. Honestly, most of what I know about Trotsky revolves around him getting murdered with an ice pick and still kicking the guy's ass with an ice pick in his fucking head. So I
I mean,
really
that's pretty
can't tell you.
badass.
Um, I personally
Um,
am a Marxist Leninist Maoist. I can honestly say I agree with pretty much just about everything I've read of theirs so far. I'm sure I might eventually find something that I go, okay, this might be questionable, but in general, I feel that they had a good grasp on how this system is fucked and how to fix that.
yeah, yeah, well said. And I would consider myself more of a anarcho-communist. Might also say libertarian municipalist, if you want to talk about the tactics of getting where I think we need to be going. I believe very similar to what Stalin laid out, or not Stalin, oh my God, Lenin laid out in State and Revolution.
Revolution.
I just kind of believe it from the other way around. Instead of having a top-down revolution, I kind of believe in more of a bottom-up one that is built off of many networks of mutual aid that kind of coalesce and form a parallel government and eventually take over where the government has failed us all.
Absolutely.
So,
Building dual power is so vital to our
mhm,
survival. Of having community gardens and farms to be able to make sure everyone is fed, having that mutual aid network set up of being able to make trade with each other of like, okay, you build houses. I need some work done on my house. And well, I'm a plumber. So how about I come over and
hmm.
work on your plumbing and make trade in those ways and
Yeah,
barter,
yeah,
things
mhm,
like that, making sure that everyone around you has their needs met.
right.
That's fucking vital that we not be dependent on this system if we are going to put a stop to the exploitation that this system is based on.
Yeah, I agree. And I would agree too, Jesse, that I would be internationalist in orientation because I think, as we saw with, say, the likes of the Soviet Union from the onset, the likes of especially Cuba from the onset, the Western bourgeois democracies are going to attack any sort of leftist movement with whatever they can uh, to destroy them because it goes against capitalism and so it goes against their own self-interest. It's not, yeah, so I'm not speaking in any sort of conspiratorial way as though there's an international conspiracy. It's just socialism goes against capitalism's self-interest. And so they attack these movements continuously. And since right now they have the most power in the world, that doesn't bode well for basically any leftist movement. Yeah,
Agreed,
cool.
Tracy. Bottom up internationalism. Yeah, because that's a thing. These problems aren't just affecting us here. We can't only give a fuck about what happens here. We have to give a
Right.
fuck about the working class everywhere,
Hmm.
and actually be supportive of each other. Come together because otherwise we're fucked. We can't. It's not possible to only fix shit in one spot and not everywhere else. That's fucked, or you end up with shit like what has happened to the Soviet Union of being forced back into capitalism when the majority of the population there did not want that. They want their communism and their socialism back. They just
Yeah.
don't want the authoritarian that they ended up having to deal with and that they're still dealing with under capitalism. And that
Yeah.
that's something I see a lot of people don't grasp is like even right now, right here in the United States, we have hella authoritarianism under capitalism.
Hmm.
It can happen with any financial institution.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we accept authoritarianism in pretty much every workplace that we go into. Unless somehow it is a worker owned cooperative, it's authoritarianly, it is structured in an authoritarian top down sort of way, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So,
Whereas I'm firmly about power to the people, as in
Yeah.
that power of political authority belongs in the hands of the people. If we actually had a bottom up system with democratic centralism, we could actually get somewhere. Um, and if you'd like to know more about that, again, State and Revolution by Lenin, also On Authority by Engels.
Oh yeah.
Excellent reads.
I should shout out your channel too. What are you guys called on Twitch? Because I think it wasn't just for We Are Many, was it? Is the podcast on the title too?
Um, I believe it's for We Are Many podcast, but it might be
Okay,
just for We Are Many. It
I'm
had
gonna check
been
it real quick.
for We Are Many 2 or something, but I think Rob fixed that. Um, but yes, also, like Zach and Bread Theory, we are proud members of Left Signal Boost TV. There is a lot of awesome leftist content that you can find
Thank you.
there. Thank you. I, I'm so grateful that you brought us on board with that, because
Yeah, I am too.
pollination has just grown things so beautifully. And to see every time I turn around and enter the Left Signal Boost chat, there's more content creators who have joined, who are doing awesome things, and I love seeing that growth and being able to show our viewers, other content that they are also going to enjoy, and be able to learn a lot from. Thank you for that shout out.
You're welcome. Yeah, y'all should go check out that channel, and also on Facebook too. That's where most of the action is at, is on Facebook. I'm gonna bring up the Left Signal Boost TV link as soon as my computer loads it, and I'll put that in the chat as well. But Left Signal Boost TV, for those that are not familiar, is a collective of, I think we're up to like 14, 15 members now, of various types of leftist creators. We have artists, we have authors, we have streamers of various type, podcasters, YouTube video essayists, all sorts of things happening down at Left Signal Boost TV. So I encourage you all to check that out, and I will link that right now for you.
Hell yeah. It's a wonderful resource. You will find all kinds of shows on there, whether it
Yeah.
be debates or doing book pieces like what we're doing right now. Um, Malik asks, "What's the path to socialism in America?" I'll tell you, we've had some solid people like Bernie Sanders fighting for that for decades, and I mean, God love him, he's fucking tried, but it's also shown us that reformism doesn't work. I honestly think that our path to that is going to have to be revolution, because we don't have many generations to wait around for, that to actually happen. And yes, I'm aware, and I disagree with him endorsing them. I
Yeah,
absolutely
me as well, for that matter. And that was just kind of the price he paid to caucus to be able to campaign under their banner. But
Yep.
yeah, I think it was more out of not wanting Trump to win than it was any sort of actual heartfelt endorsement of any Democrat. But yeah, Democrats show that they're going to screw over anyone who's the least bit progressive. They all arrayed against Bernie and screwed him over not once but twice,
Right.
so that they could have their chosen candidate come out ahead. In the end anyway. So he really got screwed over.
I mean, the American people as a whole have been fucked over by this. I mean, look at what's happening right now with Dems being like, we just need you to vote harder and donate more. And I call a big fat fuck you on that one, because, okay, Biden and Hillary, for example, have both been very vocal about not being in favor of women having the right to make the choices about our own fucking bodies. Hillary is currently supporting Democrat candidates
no.
that are anti Roe v. Wade. Biden has flat out said that he does not think that a woman should have sole choice over what she does with her body, things like that. So this right here really shows that establishment Democrats are in fact fucking right wing. They are conservative, like we've been screaming for a long fucking time. That this is a farce. That they have actually led the American public to believe that Dems are left wing and are right wing. No, they are both right wing. They wanted to
They're both
annihilate
capitalist
any
parties.
knowledge
Yeah.
of the real left, of being a socialist. And I don't mean a Dem socialist, I mean a real socialist, a communist, or an anarchist. They wanted to criminalize that with McCarthyism and do all this Red Scare bullshit because they were literally afraid of people actually fucking coming together and fighting for our rights. If you look at the history of it when it comes to unionization, guess what? Started by anarchists and communists. Every fucking movement that has happened that has fought for human rights, leftists. That's a threat to this system. Those two wings are on the same bird and fuck the entire.
But yeah, I mean, they both are outwardly for capitalism and continuing it on. So yeah, I would put them both on the right side of the political spectrum as well. And I mean, for a current example of how they're just kind of giving in and not fighting as hard as they could be putting tons of pressure on Manchin and Cinema to allow the filibuster to be done away with so that they can actually get some legislation passed. But they're not.
They're
They're
not.
just standing on principle and allowing things to continue to not be passed and not get anything done. So
The Democrats start
so
everything with a compromise position.
yeah, well, they often benefit from the status quo because it's good for raising money and getting people scared enough to keep on voting for them and to keep on donating to their campaigns because they have some big scary thing they can put up on their poster to rally against.
That's why they've had 50 years to codify Roe and didn't fucking do it, sat on their hands instead,
Mm-hmm.
and in the last few months have refused to fight for it because they would rather use that as an emotional manipulation tick to try to convince you to vote blue no matter who and just throw more money at them
Right.
for them to sit there and not fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're not going to help sure, they're not going to willingly help the Democrats, but they could probably be forced to if enough pressure was put upon them. It is possible to pressure politicians to vote against what they believe in if enough of a mass movement is mustered against them, or if their own party puts enough pressure on them. I mean, that's how the Civil Rights Act got passed. It was LBJ putting pressure on his own party, and he said that if you don't pass this bill, we're not going to have any of this come to be voted on. Yeah.
Jesse, one of the things
So they had
was passing a bill that would directly protect women's right to choose our own health care. And then once in office, he refused to do so. Said it wasn't a priority.
so under Obama, also under Clinton, also under Carter, there was windows of time where they had a supermajority, where they could have, again, had they applied the right pressure to their own members and not been stymied by their own members and allowed themselves to be, they could have pushed through whatever they wanted, including, a Medicare for all sort of a bill. They could have done that under Obama. There was a brief window where they had a supermajority, where they had 60 senators. That's a veto-proof majority.
Yep.
And they allowed themselves to defeat themselves, basically. Under Obama, it was the Blue Dog Democrats that were like, oh, I'm not so sure about all this sort of thing. And they just, instead of putting whatever pressure they could to seize the moment, they just allowed it to pass. And then ended up getting a very much watered down version in Obamacare as a result. So, yeah, and that's the thing is you can still get stuff done in your party even if it's split if you apply the right pressure. If you threaten they could have threatened all the Blue Dog Democrats with primary challengers in their districts. They could have taken them off their committees that they had been appointed to. there's plenty of ways that they could have exercised their power in order to twist their arm into going along with what the majority of Democrats wanted to see happen at the time. But they chose not to. So it sucks, but yeah, it seems like it just keeps happening. Um, and I personally am not saying don't vote or anything like that. I think there still can be value in voting, especially at the local level. A lot of the things that affect your everyday life are decided at the local level. Who gets housing, whether or not there's school lunches, school funding, and school districting, all of that can be decided at the local level. So I think that's very critical, especially. And then as you go up the levels, um, as you go up the levels to you finally get at the national level, not only do progressives or leftists um, not have a lot of sway, but there's just so much money sloshing around that it's hard to ever really get your voice heard, even if you do have the numbers, because you're always up against some or some war chest of um, interested billionaires on the other side. I don't know, that's totally fine to bring up concerns. I mean, I'm totally I'm all for people criticizing the things that myself and others say on this channel. That's totally great, um, as long as it's in good faith, I guess. So yeah, so no problem at all. Thank you for bringing up your issues and your questions. I very much appreciate it. So Epic Prawn says, right, pro-choice Democrats, dinos, whatever, have never had a supermajority. That's true. That is true. But people like Obama could have used their power of their office, could have used that bully pulpit to twist the arms of the people that weren't going along with them either. So
They do it for other shit. Why not for human rights?
right, why not for a noble cause? That's true. Um, yeah, yeah. It's like like we've been talking about in this chapter, like I've been bringing up many times. The system is rigged against parties that are not in favor of the status quo, and the status quo being just capitalism. So
Yeah.
keeping on with the current system, it's really hard for any other sort of party to get purchase, because they'll be blocked at every turn by the major parties. They'll whine about throwing your vote away and being spoilers, and as though they're entitled to your vote, um, and all this
Sure.
other thing. And little by little, in some places, they are getting things like ranked choice voting, so that third parties actually have a chance. They have that in Minneapolis right now for their elections. So there's hope, but really, for any third party to really be viable, I think it should start at the local level, because again, you don't have as much big money interfering, and then also you have a better chance of structuring things in a way that can give the tiniest sliver of hope for a third party not being completely shut out from political office. Um, so you can get things like ranked choice voting. You can get things like proportional representation. Um, so so yeah. Um, could who though is the thing. I'm sorry. I'm not sure which statement you're responding to there, Jesse. Because of funders, could they do what? I don't know. Let's see. Alyosha says even Massachusetts don't want ranked choice voting because it waters down the vote. No, it doesn't. That's ridiculous. It allows people to vote for the people that they actually want first and foremost. And then if no one gets 50%, then all the people who vote, it's a pretty easy system. They take all of the least vote getters and they redistribute those people's votes to their second choice. And they just keep doing that till someone has 50%. It's still not proportional representation, so it's not as good as or democratic as it could be, but it's a hell of a lot better than the system we got right now. But yeah, they'll come up with all sorts of excuses to block those sorts of initiatives. But if we're going to have any hope of ever actually challenging the Democrats from the left, then we got to break apart the systems that keep them structurally in power. So
Epic
go ahead,
crime. I would like to point out that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has already made public that they are going after um, what is it? Groswell v. Connecticut, which is the bill that protects your right to access contraceptives. They're going after that next, as well as gay marriage. I forget now what was the other one. Privacy in the bedroom. There was 3 rulings that he said that they are going to revisit.
yeah.
But contraception is one of them.
And eventually that I don't know how you put it, but that series of precedents that all those because they're not laws, I don't know how you would call it, but those national policies, the things that they all rest on with the courts, is also the same sort of precedents that interracial marriage was legalized in. So there's a possibility they could even go after that. Um, so let's see. There was something else I wanted. So Joe Biden did make statements, and that seems to be what Joe Biden is good at is making statements, saying the thing, but then not really doing a whole heck of a lot about it. Uh, Certainly not keeping much, if any, of his campaign promises. I mean, he couldn't even get us the full $2,000 of COVID relief. He had to say, oh, but well, part of it counted from what Trump gave you already, so we're going to lower it. For what? For what reason? Who knows? But couldn't even get us all of that. But at least he got us something. So that is one thing he did. But could with a stroke of a pen, erase student debt. Um, there's a bunch of other promises that he could have kept too through executive orders, or at least tried to keep through executive orders. But he just, as soon as he finds a stumbling block, he'll say, "Oh no, we can't do it," and then blame it on the Senate parliamentarian. He'll blame it on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, but it doesn't really seem to be trying that hard to force things through. And I mean that's power in a nutshell. Is you do what you can get away with. I mean that's what we're seeing playing out right now. These justices are doing exactly what they can get away with. Um, so unfortunately, there's no such thing as being politically neutral or having standing on principle amount to anything. You gotta pull the levers when you can, however you do it, even if it seems underhanded or dirty. Republicans are more than willing to do that sort of thing. They do it time and time again. And even if we can retort hypocrite, 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 at the end of the day, if they have passed legislation that have taken away people's rights or put religion into the schools, uh, or do any of the things on their agenda, then it doesn't really matter if they're hypocrites because they got what they wanted. So if Democrats behave that same way, you might see some more action rather than just talk and ceremony.
Right. Words are cheap. Actions speak louder than words.
And that's true that executive orders can be overturned, but at least for that time, that's progress. And if there's one thing we know, it's that when people have a right granted to them and then suddenly get it taken away, that's usually a lot harder than never giving it to them in the first place. There's a much bigger uproar and movement against whoever's taking away their rights than there otherwise would be if they never were granted it in the first place.
That's
So,
where I have a big problem with this. Is it constitutional or not argument? Guess what? I have the right to determine what the fuck I do with my skin suit because I was born with that right. This is my meat suit. I'm the one riding around in it.
I agree.
I say what I fucking do with this skin suit or not. Constitutional or not simply means, well, these men gave you this and these men can take it the fuck away.
Mhm.
And I'm here to say fuck them on that because human rights are human
Right.
rights. Those rights are inherent to us simply for being born.
I agree.
Other
I
people
agree.
are born with
Bodily
it.
autonomy, pretty
Yep.
basic level, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
Even with it being kicked back to the States, I say fuck that too because my neighbors, the people in my city, the people in my state, they also do not have the right to have a vote on whether they consider me or anybody else capable of giving birth of whether or not we are actually fully realized human beings with the right to bodily autonomy.
I would agree with that.
It's not up for debate.
I would agree it's not up for debate either. Usually, questions of who gets to be a person and who gets to have rights shouldn't really be up for debate.
Right.
I would agree with that. No matter what the wealthy slave owning founders of this country believe, I don't really care what they believe. I still think it should be
Right.
a right that people should have rights to be people and live the life that they want to live, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. But with executive orders, getting back to that, if Biden forgave all student debt, it doesn't matter if you overturn that executive order. The debt's gone. They're not just going to be like, oh, whoops, a minute. All right, sure, Zen. They're not going to be like, oh, wait a minute, we're going to give you back your student debt after we overturn this executive order. I don't think that's a possibility. Once you've nullified the debt, it's just gone. So there's that. But also, I would rather have executive orders making progress so that people can at least live under whatever progress is being made, and get used to it, and then want to fight for it. So even if it's temporary, I think it's worth doing. Yeah, a logistical nightmare to forgive debt? Well, not really. Like basically, it's just numbers in books. Like all the debt that's owed to the government through student loans, you could just say, "Oh, it's forgiven." It's not that hard. You basically just dismantling all of the student loan lending apparatus that comes from the government. Yeah. Well, it's the 1700s. The Constitution was written, but still, it's, 16th century, sure. Or no, that would be the 18th century. Never mind. Uh, anyway, so the thing is, we don't know how hard it would be to do because he's not really even trying to do it, and I don't think he's really used the excuse that it's too logistically difficult to untangle. He just says, I don't know that I have the right to do that. Well, he's not really trying either. Instead of acting like Trump and acting and then daring people to call him on his bluff, he's just, oh, I guess I probably don't have the right to do that, so I'm not really going to try. And that's not what we need right now at all. I'm sure there are executive orders that he could do to help women, or I should say womb havers, people that are capable of carrying children, have more protections than they now currently have. At the very least, stop this interstate suing scheme that is being put into place, where someone can sue other states for providing abortions if it's a citizen of the state that is going out to another state where it's legal. He could probably put a stop to that sort of thing, I would imagine. But really, what is he doing though? Like, what great things has Biden done? He's made some speeches. He said the things. He took a good stand on COVID. I guess I'll give him that. He's definitely much better on COVID than Trump ever was. But I just don't feel like he's doing anything, or at least not trying very hard to do it. No problem at all, Jesse. And even if you were coming from a more liberal persuasion, I'm happy having people of virtually any political view on, in the chat and challenging things. That's great. As long as you're not some weirdo reactionary, I'm fine with you being in the chat, no matter what you're coming off as. So it doesn't matter to me. But even if you're not Libby and that's not representative of yourself, that's totally fine to have your positions. Oh, okay. You're saying it for yourself. Gotcha. Right. So he's just not. I don't think that Biden is as bad as Trump was, but he's not. He's kind of just neutral. He's just not good either.
Right. Apathy's a bitch.
Yeah.
And he's pretty apathetic about a lot of things that.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess like people would expect the Democratic Party to actually be up in arms about, and he's just like,
Right. And that's a fair point, Allie. They did actually pass a gun reform bill, so he did sign that into law. So there's one thing, one little notch on his belt. But I mean, if that's the best that we can hope from him in the first year and a half of his term, like I'm just not really overwhelmed with hope that much of anything good is going to happen in that time, and that this Supreme Court, which has just turned itself into a wrecking ball for everything that's happened since the founding of the goddamn country, is just going to keep continuing. That seems to be the trajectory we're on at this point.
Right. They want to keep going back to, well, did the founding fathers want that? I don't give a flying fuck what the founding fathers want. Their
Care.
asses are dead, been dead for a long fucking time. They have no stake in the future. And not to mention, they made it very fucking clear with their founding documents and everything
Mhm.
that what they intended to build a system for was specifically curtailed to wealthy white men. Nobody else was considered.
Landowning at that too. Yeah.
Yes, specifically.
Yep. Yeah, and they were also super
Problem.
cool with slavery. They believed women were more or less property of their husbands. That they certainly shouldn't be able to vote. That's what they believed. And they didn't believe that anyone who is not white should have much of any rights. So I don't really care what he thought, what any of them thought. Even the ones that didn't own slaves, like Benjamin Franklin. I don't care. He does, at the very least, he doesn't live in this era. He's not facing the sort of challenges that we are today. So what is the point of having just this dead document that we're just beholden to for the rest of eternity, that we can at best add an amendment to here or there, maybe once a generation? Like, if that's the best that we can hope for, then this system deserves to crumble,
Yep.
just outright. That is the definition of a conservative, even reactionary sort of system. Okay, thanks, Allie. I wish there was a way that I could allow just you specifically to share links. There probably is some way, I just don't know about it. But right now, I keep all the links out of here because you never know who's gonna wander in and start sharing stuff that could be damaging to people. But you can always put it in the Discord. So I'll put up the Discord once again for everybody. Yeah, I don't know how to do the VIP thing. I'll have to fool around with that because there could be some way to do it that I'm just unaware of. I mean, more than likely there is. I don't know everything about Twitch, so let me see if I can get to it real
If
quick.
there's something you should do that, where you can at least be like, hey, this floor is a source that I would allow, you know.
Right. Like, let's see here if there's something I can do to. Maybe if I modded you, that would allow you. I'll make you a mod, Allie. How about that? Let's see if you can share that now. Try sharing that link again, if you would, please, and see if it'll pop up. You're welcome. You've always been a great chatter, really good supporter of the show. So yeah, I definitely appreciate you a lot. Half the working class wants to ban abortion. How will you form a workers' movement if it's a red line?
It's not half though. Actually, the majority of the population in this country wants to be able to protect the right to abortion. The problem that we
Oh
have
yeah.
often with gerrymandering to try to lend unequal weight to conservative voters. Um, there's a lot of problems with how our voting system works here that is literally built to give more power of their vote to conservatively wealthy rural specifically voters. all the way down to even the electoral college and stuff. So that's the biggest part of the problem. If I remember right, it was something like 65% of the population actually wants to protect the right to access an abortion.
Yeah, yeah, something like 60%, I think is right. Um, but I think that's where to me, that's where these sort of foundational documents should be covering things like human rights more than they do. It shouldn't just be the right to speech and to the press and to having a gun. That's all well and good, but it should also be things like, an equal amendment or equal rights amendment, which has been ratified by almost as many people or almost as many states as you need to have in order to all have equal standing under the law and no legalized discrimination of any kind at that point.
Right.
So let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I'll link it in the
And
chat.
that's the thing. When it comes down to anything that is a basic human right, it shouldn't even be up for debate or legislation. Um, it's one of those things that who the fuck says that anybody else in the population has the right or the privilege to vote away your human rights because they are bigots who see you as less human, who shouldn't have that right? It's not okay.
You do raise a good question though, Jesse. What do you do if you have direct democracy but people don't take their responsibility right and use it to beat up on other people? Um, that's true, but also what we have now is a minority of people that can use their power to take away the rights of the majority, and all for their own benefit. So what we have is even worse than that. So there's that, but then also that's kind of just part of trusting people and allowing them to have autonomy. It's yeah, they could make bad decisions that then you may have to deal with. Um, that's just part of the bargain that you make, hoping that in general people are not going to use their little bit of power to band together and then um, screw over someone for arbitrary reasons. Anyway, here's the Equal Rights Amendment. I will paste that. But yeah, we could have things in the Constitution like bodily autonomy, like the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which we could then extend out to being entitled to have the basics of life. We could put whatever we want in the Constitution, and we could put abortion access into the Constitution. There's any number of things, but I think that's what a Constitution should be for, is granting rights that then, vulnerable minorities cannot then be trampled upon because of that. So, and you could have that at the local level as well. You could start out with like your local group of mutual aid networks, building up your parallel structures, um, and then you could decide to confederate with other people that agree to your basic tenets, and you could write into your basic tenets these sorts of human rights. So, at the very least, the people that are all working together um, at some degree or another are on the same page about who gets to have rights, which hopefully should be everybody. Um, but I mean, there's always the case that either a minority or a majority could beat up on a vulnerable minority. So you don't get rid of it just by having a different form of government. I don't know of any form of government where there's no possibility for the wrong people to have any sort of power, or for the wrong people to enact cruel legislation that arbitrarily beats up on a group of people just trying to live their lives. So
And
it's just
that's
something you always
why
got to fight for.
things like this, when it comes to your human right to determine your own bodily autonomy, what you do with your skin suit, should never be up for a vote, because you could be surrounded by a fuckload of bigots who go, well, I don't want you to have the right to determine what you want to do with your body.
Right.
And
Yeah. So
here's how they feel somebody chooses to do with their body. Their feelings are relevant, govern how they
right.
fucking carry themselves with their own fucking bodily autonomy. It doesn't have the right to govern over anybody
Hey, James.
else's bodily autonomy. Hi, James.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You have to balance rights. My right to swing my arm should end at the tip of your nose. If someone is having more rights than me, then that's not a fair system that I would want to be a part of. Um, so if that means that people say don't have the right to enslave one another, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with taking away that right. If people don't have the right to take the product of other people's labor just because they happen to own the means of production, um, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But if people do have the right to, or people are, if we take away the right of people to uh, take the product of others' labor because they own the means of production, I'm okay with getting rid of that right for those people. That's okay with me.
Because that's actually a privilege, not a right.
Right. Well, I mean, it certainly could be a right. It all depends on the way that your government has enshrined things. So, you know, I don't believe in a right to private property. I do
Right.
believe in a right to personal property, but yeah, I don't believe you should be able to just be an owner and make money that way. That does not seem right to me. So So yeah, thank you for all the links, Alyosha. I'll take a look at those at some other time, but we're going over time for tonight. I really do appreciate the discussion, everybody. This has been great. Didn't make it through a whole lot of the chapter this week, but you know we're just going at whatever pace we set for ourselves, so it's all good. There's no rush to get through the book, but we got just about not quite an hour, about 50 minutes to go. So yeah, that's totally fine.
Sounds about right. I mean, we've managed to do a chapter roughly every 3 weeks on
Yeah,
this book.
and
So,
it's a big book. It takes a lot of discussion to sift through and untangle these pretty weighty issues.
right.
So thank you all for joining us in that endeavor. I really do appreciate it. Um, it looks like we got a number of people on Twitch tonight, which is great, and that means that we can raid into somebody. Even though I'm using Restream, we can still use Twitch to raid someone. So I remember someone had brought up a particular streamer whose name escapes me, but I think I'll see if I can find them right now. Otherwise, if anyone has any suggestions of who to raid into, I think it was Beer Bash Jocelyn. That was the person that was recommended. Looks like Feminist Critique is on right now. Freems, Riverboat Jack, Matt Binder, and then it just gets to be larger and larger creators that I do like to try and raid into the smaller creators too, because I want us all to grow together. So, Beer Bash Jocelyn. Sure. Since you're the first to recommend, that's the person we'll raid into. So, for all of you joining me on Twitch, thank you so much. It's been great to start to get to know you in the chats that we've been having on Facebook, and I can't wait to have you in future streams. So we will start the raid for that, and then after that we will just end the show altogether. But all of you on Twitch, please hang on for the raid. Um, I don't know. I don't think I have a particular raid message. Just the Reapers, whatever you call it, that's good enough. Or the raid, whatever it is, that's totally fine.
Right.
Bread raid, sure. That'll work. That's perfect, actually. Good job.
Bringing the bread to their table.
All right, so we will bring up that streamer right now, Beer Bash Jocelyn, and we will start the raid presently. Thank you all, and hope to see you Wednesday. Wednesday, I'm going to be having on a friend of mine on Facebook, Chet Gaines, and he's going to be talking. Oh shoot, what is he going to be talking about? Now I'm totally blanking on it, but it's going to be a fun discussion. Um, Whatever it is. I feel so embarrassed. I can't remember what it is at the moment, but I will get back to you with that, and I will be posting it on the social medias. So hope to see you all then. And here starts the raid. So Beer Bash Jocelyn only accepts raids from teammates and followed channels. So I guess instead we're going to choose feminist critique. Some of y'all have to get into Beer Bash Jocelyn's channel and tell them to follow me. So the next time we can raid into their channel. But for tonight, it's going to be feminist critique.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you for having me on again. Thank you.
You
everyone
are
in the audience.
welcome.
It's been awesome as always. I love these discussions.
Oh my goodness. I thought feminist critique followed me, so I guess that's not working either. Have to find yet another person. My goodness. Never had this much trouble with a raid before. Let's see. Riverboat Jack, I think, is the next on the list, so we will try them. Let's see. There we go. Riverboat Jack. Tell him who sent you. And thank you all, and see you next time.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. All right, and then I will go ahead and stop the stream tonight. Thank you, Trisha, for being here, and yeah, be excited to have you in future streams. So keep going through this.
Hell yes.
All right.
I'm
Have a good
loving the
night.
collaborations. I can't wait
Oh,
to have you
so great.
for Reader Many too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a lot of fun the last time. I think we got a lot of good discussion going. So, yeah,
Hell yeah.
definitely look forward to more of that. All right. See y'all.